What's up guys? Today we are going over the Hatchet. You all have asked for it, and here it is. The Hatchet is a absolute unit in single target melee combat. Its damage bonuses and passive heals on top of having the ability to delay death makes it a unkillable terror. And it is a amazing combo with the sword and shield for added survivability and CC, and the bow for a safe playstyle that gives you more mobility, which we will cover later in the video. So now let's get into the Hatchet and see why it's so good. The Hatchet wreaked havoc during the preview, so they had to nerf it a bunch of times, but it still found a way to be on top of the food chain. For the Hatchet, we will be focusing on the single target damage, passive healing, and survivability, because that's where the Hatchet pulls far ahead of the competition, and during this video, I think you'll start to see why. The Hatchet scales off primarily strength, with a side stat of dexterity. It has two skill trees, Berserker and Throwing. Sadly, the throwing tree is very underwhelming, and so far there is no reason to spec into this tree as the bow can do the same things but far better. So we will be ignoring this tree and sticking with the Berserker tree. So before we get into it, if you haven't already, consider subscribing. I'll be making more videos like this in the future, going over weapon builds, updates, and stories. I thank you all, and let's get back into it. Now let's look at the Berserker tree and its abilities and passives. The first ability is Feral Rush, a sprinting melee attack that causes the player to leap forward, hitting twice. The first hit deals 100% and the second two deal 115% weapon damage, with two passives of note. First is Dispatch. If a target is below 30% health, Feral Rush deals 20% more damage. Second is Crippling Strikes. If Feral Rush hits a target in the back, it roots them, which immobilizes them for 2 seconds. This is a great counter escape to keep enemies locked into the fight with you. The second ability is Berserk, and this is one of the best weapon abilities in the game. Triggers a Berserk mode that will increase all attack damage by 20% while active. Berserk mode will be active for 15 seconds, with 4 passives of note. First one is On the Hunt. Berserker increases movement speed by 20% while active. Second is Berserking Refresh. Heal for 30% of your maximum health when Berserk ends. Third is Berserking Purge. Activating Berserk removes all crowd control effects like stuns, slows, and roots. Fourth is Uninterruptible Berserk. While in Berserk, your attacks are uninterruptible and you cannot be staggered. This ability is absolutely amazing. It's so powerful, it's basically going to force enemies to try to run while it's active, because there's no way they will be able to outdamage you, and keep in mind that it has a 15-second cooldown, which is such a short cooldown for such a powerhouse of a ability, especially when you get a 30% heal off of each activation. Now the third ability is Raging Torrent. Perform 4 fast attacks, each dealing 80% weapon damage, with one passive of note called Aggressive Approach. That increases movement speed by 20% for 6 seconds if you hit an enemy with Raging Torrent. There's 8 tree passives of note, and since all the passives on the throwing tree only affect throwing abilities, they are sadly useless. So you will want to pick up all of these, starting with Enraged Strikes. Enemies below 30% health take 20% more damage from light and heavy attacks. Next is Accumulated Power. 3 successful light attacks against the same target grant Empower, which gives 30% increased damage for 3 seconds or until the next attack. Next is Relentless Fury. After a successful heavy attack, gain Empower, which gives 30% increased damage for 3 seconds, or after 4 attacks. Next is Desperate Refresh. Cooldowns are reduced by 5% if you hit an enemy with an attack while your health is below 30%. Next is Against All Odds, which gives 10% increased damage for every enemy within 5 meters. Next is Fortifying Strikes. Hitting the same target with 3 light attacks grants Fortify that increases damage absorption by 15% or 3 seconds. Next is Frenzied Purge. Removes all damage over time effects like bleed, burn, and poison. When you hit an enemy while your health is below 30%, it has a cooldown of 60 seconds. And the final and best one is Defy Death. When you receive lethal damage, you avoid death for 4 seconds, becoming immortal. So now, I'm sure you can see why the Hatchet will be such a scary weapon up close. It will be able to outdamage almost any weapon once it gets on top of you, and because the Hatchet can break free of almost all forms of CC, while getting speed boosts and massive passive heals, a Hatchet player will stick to you like glue, and it's going to be very difficult to escape. With that in mind, let's take a look at the sword and shield and the bow. Also, I would have put the rapier on here as it's a perfect pair with the Hatchet for a glass cannon build, but I already made a video going over the rapier in detail. If you want to check it out, I'll put a link above. It's an insane weapon with extremely high damage, similar to the Hatchet. So now let's first look at the sword and shield. The sword and shield is a melee weapon that scales off primarily strength with a side stat of dexterity. The 2 skill trees are Swordmaster and Defender. For this video, we're going to be looking at the Defender tree because of its added survivability and additional CC to help you stay on top of your target. Let's start with the 3 abilities that will help us add CC and some survivability. The first ability is Shield Bash. Deal 50% weapon damage and stun foes in front of you for 2 seconds, with a passive that helps increase stun duration to 3 seconds. The second ability is Shield Rush. Rush forward 5 meters, knocking back foes and dealing 125% weapon damage, with 2 passives that decrease the damage done by enemies by 10% for 4 seconds in a 5-meter radius, and applies a 30% slow for 4 seconds also in a 5-meter radius. The third ability is Final Stand. For 8 seconds, all damage is reduced by 30%, with 2 passives that increase the damage reduction by 20% if your health is below 50%, and the second that restores 15% of your maximum health after Final Stand ends. That 15% heal pairs really well with the 30% heal from Berserk, giving a ton of survivability. There's 5 tree passives that help with survival, where Shield provides 15% more armor. When you block a attack, gain 10% Fortify for 5 seconds, reduce damage from all magic types by 10%, and while holding a sword, your current and max health are increased by 10%. All incoming healing and regeneration is increased by 10%. The reason I chose the sword and shield to pair with the hatchet is the added armor, health, and resistance bonuses, on top of gaining a ton of CC to give you an absolute upper hand in single target combat. So now, let's look at the bow. The bow is a ranged weapon that scales solely from dexterity. The 2 skill trees are called Skirmisher and Hunter. Both of these trees are good for this setup, but for this video we will be looking at the Skirmisher tree, because it gives us more room to work with and more chances to stop enemies from running away. So now let's start with the 3 abilities that will help you in combat. First, we have Poison Shot. Shoot a poison arrow that on hit or land creates a cloud of poison 3 meters wide that lasts 10 seconds. Foes entering the cloud are poisoned, dealing 10% weapon damage per second for 20 seconds. Second is Evade Shot. Leap back 5 meters and shoot an arrow, dealing 125% weapon damage, with 2 passives that give Evade Shot a knockback of 2 meters and 33% haste for 5 seconds. A good panic ability for when things get out of control. The third ability is Rain of Arrows. Shoot a barrage of arrows 7 meters wide that deals 150% weapon damage, which has 2 passives that give Rain of Arrows a bleed for 85% weapon damage over 12 seconds that stacks up to 3, and another that gives a 30% slow for 12 seconds. This will give you plenty of room to work with. After casting Evade Shot, since the enemy will get knocked back as you leap back, and you can slap this in between, creating a barrier for a short time. There's a few passives that increase movement speed by 33%, slow for 30% if you hit an enemy that has 100% health, 20% haste after dodge, and 20% haste when you swap to the bow, and leg shots will slow by 50% for 4 seconds. This combo is going to be a pretty potent one with the hatchet, as it allows you to kite and deal tons of damage, since both the hatchet and a bow scale from dexterity. And due to the slows, escapes, heals, and berserk, on top of being immortal for 4 seconds if you receive lethal damage, this combo will be extremely hard to deal with in PvP. I hope you all enjoyed watching. If you did, feel free to check out my other videos. I think you will like them. And as always guys, have a good one.